Hello, this is Colin, and this is today's tea, and today's tea is Nonsuch. Well, today I finished the For All the Tea in China, a very entertaining and informative book about Robert Fortune, who was, I guess you would say, the James Bond of tea. He was an industrial spy, I guess you would have to say. He went into China in the 1840s, 1850s in disguise on behalf of the East India Company, the British East India Company, to spy and gather information and gather plants and seeds from China of tea to be grown in India. Well, Robert Fortune eventually was able to successfully, after some trial and error and some setbacks and some danger, to send back tea plants successfully to India and establish tea plantations in India. Some of the finest teas in the world, such as Darjeeling, are now the descendants of the tea plants, and tea experts, because it wasn't enough just to bring the plants. They actually had to smuggle Chinese tea experts out of China to India to work under contract. And tea in India was established as a thriving industry. But that wasn't all. The American U.S. patent agent decided that tea might be a viable crop for the southern United States. Now, we all think of the United States as being hostile to tea ever since that little incident in Boston Harbor. But no, there was a actual plan. They hoped to use, because it was the industrial age, they hoped to use steam mechanization to help them to establish tea plantations in the American South. So they hired Robert Fortune, the world's leading tea spy, and he went back to China and he gathered seeds and plants and he sent them to Washington, D.C., and when that happened, the Americans promptly fired him. Well, they don't need him anymore. They have the plants and the seeds. So the patent office planted the seeds, developed the plants, and eventually sent out some 30,000 plants across the southern United States to experiment with and to hopefully establish tea plantations. Unfortunately, they did this in 1860. In 1861, the American Civil War broke out. Of course, the South was devastated. But more than that, the slaves were free. The steam mechanization that it was hoped for had not developed to the point where it was, usable. So the only real way to harvest tea, particularly, which was a very labor-intensive project, was through slave labor. And that was no longer available, so the idea of tea in America just sort of died a death. But not entirely. Not entirely. There is a tea plantation in the United States. It's the Charleston tea plantation in, I think it's South Carolina, one of the north or south, one of those two. Anyway, it's in 1799, a Frenchman, a botanist, Francois André Millau, I'm not sure if that's how it's pronounced, came to the South Carolina and gave some samples of tea plants to a Henry Middleton. And after that, there was a number of attempts to establish tea plantations in South Carolina, none of which lasted more than 20 years. But in about, 1960, I think it was, there was an actual attempt another attempt that was backed by Lipton. So this is Lipton money that was backing this attempt to establish a tea plantation in Summerville, South Carolina. In 1963, it was moved to Wadmalaw Island off the coast. And in 1987, the project was taken over by a Bill Hall, who was a third-generation tea tester from England, and Mac Fleming. Well, their partnership dissolved in 2003 when the plantation was bought by the Bigelow Company. And it remains to this day on Wadmalaw Island, the United States' only actual tea tea plantation. Now, everything I know about tea, well, other than Assam, it tells me that tea really does well on mountainsides. That's where tea in China and India mostly is grown on mountainsides. So the idea of growing tea on an island I found kind of strange, but it is subtropical, does get quite a bit of rainfall. And the soil, I think it's because the soil is sandy, it drains well. That's the important thing about having tea on a hillside, is that you need a lot of water, but it has to drain. It can't rot the roots. So you've got sandy soil, the water drains, and they have, what was it, 6 blends of tea. Charleston breakfast, Governor Gray, I guess, see, the Americans, they don't have royalty, Plantation Peach, Rockville Raspberry, and an Island Green. And it helps that in 1987, this became the official tea of the White House. So if you go out to White House in the United States and you sit down with Obama, who I suspect is a tea drinker, you will be served authentic American tea. And also, I should announce, because they have an annual First Flush Tea Festival. And in this year, it's going to be on May 24th, and Sheryl Crow will be amongst the acts performing at the First Flush Tea Festival. So, good on them, I say. So I'm going to look for this and see if I can pick some up and tell you if it's any good. But, tea in America. Cheers.